Hi, I'm Kaja. I'm the General Manager of Radio Phoenix. We are the community radio station serving the Valley. We are an online station, and we were founded in 2008. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Gangplank for inviting me to come out and speak with you all. We enjoy educating the community about the power of independent media, and hopefully you'll be able to get something out of this. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the history of community radio at the national level as well as at the regional and local level, and give you some examples of some really great community-based radio stations, including ours. And at the end, if you have some Q&A for me, that didn't even sound right, never mind. If you have questions for me, I'll probably have some answers, and if I don't, we have a couple people also here from Radio Phoenix, Kevin and Andrew, who will probably be able to answer your questions as well. I don't know if this is going to look good up there, but okay, it looks pretty good. So I'm calling this Community Radio as a Social Movement. It's a little take on a history workshop that we give to our volunteers when we teach them the broader history of independent media. And just to start out, I'm just going to give you a little bit about myself so that you know I'm not some random person that they asked to come in, although it seems like they like to ask random people to come in and talk to you, so that's okay. I'm the co-founder and a board member of an organization called Arizona Community Media Foundation, also known as AZCMF, and that group is working towards launching and developing independent media resources for the Valley so that you have a community radio station, independent community TV, websites that provide independent news, etc. I'm also the general manager of our primary project, Radio Phoenix. I graduated from ASU in 2006 with a degree in a BIS, which is basically a step above liberal arts, and I was able to focus on sociology and mass communication during my studies there. I have 14 years of experience working in various forms of media, namely radio, commercial, and public radio. And then some stations that I've worked at in the past include a station in New York, at least one here in Phoenix. There were some others, and then a station up in Portland, Oregon. So during our workshop, we're going to go through 3 segments, and I'm going to answer some questions for you. The first one is, what is community radio? Just so you kind of have a broader understanding of what this is, because it's much broader than what we have here in Arizona. It's very diverse, a very rich medium, and it's actually something that has been going on all over the planet for at least 60 years. I'm going to also give you some examples of community stations, including stations here in Arizona. And then kind of introduce you to Radio Phoenix, and then if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer for you. And so I'm going to come out of this. And as I go along, if you have questions, feel free to stop me if you want to, because I mean, it doesn't have to be this static thing where I'm just talking at you. So to answer the first question, what is community radio? Community radio is basically a type of radio service that is typically locally focused, locally controlled. The majority of the content is focused on local culture, local arts, local music, things that you typically can't get from a commercial station or NPR or other sources. The difference between community radio in its purest sense and commercial radio, again, is that a heavy focus is on local content. A heavy focus is on sharing with you viewpoints and ideas that you don't get in sort of mainstream media. So you might hear about, I don't know, somebody who's doing a pop-up gallery on a community station, whereas that might get passed over by KTAR. That's an example. Sort of how community radio got started. Basically, in the United States, we started with a commercial media model, and that's really unique amongst, and I'll just let that look pretty for you. That's really unique among major countries in the world. For instance, Britain started with a public media model. Canada started with a public media model. And so we just decided that it was best to kind of, I don't know, sell airtime and make a profit versus serving our communities with meaningful content. And over time, coalitions of people got together and said, you know, we probably should use this for something more than making a profit and getting money out of the smallest amount of time that we can. And so people like members of clergy, educators, political activists, anti-war activists, students, independent artists, etc., came together and said, what way can we utilize this medium, because this was still in the early days of radio, in a way that would enable us to serve our communities and to really build something at a national level that is meaningful. And some of them wanted to create sort of like a BBC here in the United States, which was kind of scary, but the intentions were still good. Some of, I'll put it this way, a huge portion of that community, that coalition, wanted to see the government essentially establish a public broadcasting system that it could run, like I said, similar to the BBC. But there was a large percentage that wanted to do independent, almost cooperative broadcasting. And over time, that coalition kind of split into two segments. One, we like to call at Radio Phoenix Side A, which was basically people who wanted to essentially start a public radio network. And then the other side were people that we call Side B, who basically wanted to start anarchist stations. You know, which is kind of cool. There's nothing wrong with that either. So over time, they worked and worked and worked and tried to pressure the federal government into allowing public-based stations, and they failed at first in the 30s. But what ended up happening was FM radio came about in the late 30s and early 40s, and that's where we got sort of that top, or what do we call it, the lower end of the FM band, where it's now mostly public broadcasting. So that's where that came out of. That was sort of like a compromise, if you will, for those who wanted to see the larger broadcasting system have a public component. So the first community station that went on the air was actually KPFA, and that's this one right here. And it's in Berkeley, California, in some people might call it the anarchist capital of the world. And they basically brought a whole group of people together who would otherwise never, number one, get together, number two, would never get anything put on the air at that time, because major networks basically created or controlled the radio spectrum. And so you had people like feminists and anti-war protesters and gay folks and black folks and Latinos and all sorts of people coming together at this station to produce meaningful local content, to talk about issues that were relevant to their community, to play local music that would not be heard otherwise. And so today this is a model station. It has gone on to become the oldest of the community stations, and it's considered today to be a really heritage station. People go to the station to actually learn how to develop community radio. I'm going to talk a little bit now about sort of the business models, so you can understand how community stations tend to fund themselves. And to do that, I'm going to actually give you a little bit of an understanding of how the commercial side operates, how public radio like NPR stations operate, and then in that with college and community stations. So the first point that I want to provide you all with is that when we got that sort of lower end of the FM band for public media, for public radio rather, one of the stipulations was that those stations could not sell advertising. That is also unique to our country, because in Canada that's not an issue. In Mexico that's not an issue. Most countries it's not an issue. You can actually sell advertising and air, you know, actual calls to action. But for some reason in this country, those interests that were operating commercial-based stations were threatened by the opportunity that public broadcasters might have to essentially encroach on their territory. And so the way around that has been developed over the past, I guess, 50 years or so, is that public stations are allowed to sell something called underwriting. So that's like business sponsorship. It's like a uncommercial commercial in a sense. So I just wanted to put that out there so you understand as I go through this. So the commercial radio model is basically you sell advertising, and that's how you primarily make your money. You basically target an audience, you develop programming to target that audience, and then you sell advertising based on how many listeners you have. Pretty cut and dry. The NPR model is a little different. With the NPR model, basically stations contract with NPR or other groups. They get their programming from them, and then they basically beg for donations, in a sense, regardless if the programming is any good or not. The other thing that NPR stations are allowed to do is they can do the underwriting piece that I told you about. They also have the ability to go for government and private foundation grants. And then they also do events sometimes, but a good portion of what they do is pledge drives, individual donations, and business underwriting. College radio. Love college radio. That's where I got started. That is an anarchist paradise. College radio is a little different. Most college stations are subsidized in some part by their college or university. In the case of stations that are run by a state university, then they're probably also getting grants from the state. Two of the primary ways that college stations tend to make money is through student fees and through underwriting. A few of them do pledge drives, but again, they get subsidized by their college or university, so it's kind of like they don't have to work as hard for that. And then community stations primarily make their money like NPR stations through individual donations, but there are also events that they do, special events like, you know, concerts where you do ticket sales and merchandise sales. And then they also tend to have a few grants, but primarily the individual donations, business underwriting, and events. And then lastly, in this discussion about what community radio is, some ways that community stations improve the quality of life of communities is they provide, like I said earlier, a media outlet for people to express different viewpoints, which encourages diverse dialogue and tolerance in a certain sense for people who are different than you. It also exposes different people in the community to cultural music, cultural programming that you would otherwise not have access to or seek out. If, say, I'm not Jewish, but there might be a Jewish program on, I might learn something about the Jewish culture even though I'm not a Jew. And so that helps me to better understand people and not be an ass. And you know, you can probably plug in your individual background and understand where I'm coming from. For those that stream online, it allows people who might have grown up in a particular community to actually connect with that community without actually being there. So you can actually know what's going on in the political community, or you can know what's going on in your neighborhood possibly by listening to your local community station online. And then another way is you get exposed to nonprofit groups like Gangplank, small businesses, and you know, a host of events and different things that are going on in a community that you would otherwise not hear about, because those groups might not either know how to utilize advertising, or they might not be able to afford it. All right, so I'm going to transition to the second part of this and explore some examples of diverse community type stations, and that's where sort of the websites come in. In our research, we found basically 4 distinct kinds of stations. We call them formats in radio, but for your purposes, you'll understand what I mean. Those, don't worry about it. Those are indie music, freeform, mixed format, which is basically a mix of music, news, and talk, and then what we call ethnic stations. So independent music stations are basically stations, it's what they sound like. They primarily focus on exposing you to new music, to independent music, to independent arts and culture that you would otherwise not have access to. And so as I go through this segment of the discussion, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to share with you an example, a really good example of each station at the national level, meaning outside of Arizona, of course. One from our region, might be in Arizona, might not be, and then one specifically here in Arizona, just so you have a diverse understanding of the types of stations. So the strongest independent music station in the country right now is this one, Kexp. You've heard of them, yes. It's my favorite music station. They actually started out as a college station in '72, I think, and over the years really developed a following in the independent music community in Seattle. And then once they started streaming online, they actually developed a global following because they focused so heavily on independent music. I believe this was the station that first aired Nirvana, and this might have been, there were a couple other bands that escaped my mind, and I apologize, but there were a couple other big bands that I think might have been big in the Northwest maybe, because I used to live in Portland, so that's not relevant to us, never mind. One of the other things about this station that's really key is that they were an early adopter of utilizing the internet and utilizing websites and digital technology to really enhance the interactive experience that you as a listener have with their station. And so today I think they have something like 60,000 listeners just from their online stream alone, which is huge because that's almost as large as their local following in Seattle. The next indie music station that I'm going to share with you is Crux Radio. This is actually a college/community station in Las Cruces, New Mexico, out of, I think, New Mexico State University. And they are an independent music station. They've been on the air since 1989, and they're basically the closest that we have in the region to a really strong indie music station that's just focused on independent music. And they do stream online if you want to check them out, cruxradio.com. Next station is right in our backyard, sort of. Well, not quite. They're still about an hour and a half away if you're driving down I-10. But KXCI in Tucson. KXCI is actually the oldest community station in the state of Arizona. And it is focused primarily on independent music, arts, and culture, with a heavy focus on Tucson, but they also provide music from other artists from around the country. This, I believe, was the station that first aired Calexico and some of the other more famous Tucson bands. Okay, the next format we're going to look at is freeform. And freeform is basically when, say, I do a show on bluegrass, and maybe I shouldn't do that because I'm covering my mic, and then Kevin might do a show right after me on hip-hop, and then this gentleman here might do a show on, I don't know, psychedelic punk, and then Andrew might do a show right after him on, I don't know, Elvis covers. So that's freeform, when you have shows back to back to back and there's no thread that connects them, but it's just really goofy and it sounds really amazing. And so this station here, WFMU, was one of the first stations to do that experimental type of format, and they went on the air in 1958. And they're technically a New York area station, but they're operating out of New Jersey, so they're currently based in Jersey City, New Jersey, which if you've ever been to the New York area, you know is just right across the Hudson, so it's practically New York. Next station I'm going to talk about is KTRU in Houston. This is actually a college station out of Rice University in Houston, and they are really cool with the freeform stuff. Actually, and they do a lot of heavy what we call specialty shows, and so you can kind of see there's all sorts of stuff in here: ska, Americana, reggae, funk, vinyl frontier. I don't know what the hell that is. It sounds really interesting. And then in Arizona, there are actually no freeform stations, truly freeform stations. So I can't share one with you because I'd be lying to you. All right, so the next one is mixed format, and that brings us back to KPFA. So a mixed format station, like I said, is one that mixes music programming with news and talk, and you might have, like for instance, a couple hours of news programming followed by a couple hours of music followed by a couple hours of something else, but it's basically a mixture of the two. And most community stations operate with that type of format. That's actually what Radio Phoenix operates with. So KPFA, like I said, is the oldest community station in the United States, and it operates in the San Francisco area out of Berkeley. And what they've done really well, not so much the music part, but they've they have become a model station for how to develop meaningful public affairs and news content. And so that's kind of why they're on this list. Another station, KGNU, up in the Boulder, Denver area, they were started, I believe, in 1978. And they originally started out as a small station in Boulder with a little FM frequency, 88.5. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago actually, they raised some money and they bought an AM station because they had so many people in Denver who couldn't get their FM frequency but were listening online that they were like, we got to find a way to get you guys on a frequency in Denver so we can actually hear you in our cars. And so in I think 2004 or 2005 they bought 1390 AM in Denver. So if you're ever up there, you can check them out. This station is really cool as far as the free format is concerned, because they have, in a lot of ways, really been a model for how you develop community radio that engages your listener to act in a lot of ways. And so they have a lot of great local public affairs shows. In fact, one of them, I thought that was the host of it, but one of them is called Alternative Radio, and it actually did so well in their area that it's now syndicated nationally. And we carry it Saturdays at 6, or Sundays at 6, I forget. He can tell you, he's our program director. The other thing that they do really well, although not as good as some other stations, is they really involve the local community in the process of operating the station and really, you know, help the community understand that this is their station, this is their resource. And then a little station called Radio Phoenix. This is your community station here in the Valley, and we were started in 2008, and actually it looks kind of odd on here. We're going to redo the, hopefully the, there we go. So you can see some pictures, see what we look like. Like I said, we were started in 2008, and one of the things that we're working towards is becoming more of a local focused station where we have more locally produced news, more locally produced public affairs content. But in the past, we've aired programming as diverse as house music shows on Friday nights. We've aired public affairs shows where we've had a variety of people on. We've aired a lot of independent music shows that featured local bands like Kinch and Dry River Yacht Club, etc. So we are a station that basically provides an outlet and a voice for underrepresented and unrepresented peoples and culture. Okay, and then the last group of stations we're going to talk about is what we call ethnic stations. And ethnic stations are basically community stations that are targeted towards a specific people group. So might be African Americans, might be Hispanics, might be Latinos. I don't think there are any that are specifically targeting the gay community yet, but I can find out. So the 3 stations I'm going to tell you about, actually are going to be 4. The first one here is KPOO. It's in San Francisco. It was founded in 1974, and it's known as Po People's Radio. They so Po they can't afford the R. This is a very, very important station because it was actually one of the first ones in the Bay Area to play rap music, to play reggae, to play a lot of music genres that we actually take for granted today. I think they might have also been one of the first to play world music. So it's a very a really good example of sort of an ethnic focused station, but it's very involved in the community that it serves, and their community supports them. One that I'm going to share with you is called Radio Compensina, and this is sort of the website. You might not be able to see everything. Radio Compensina is actually a regional network that serves the West Coast in Arizona, and it was founded by the Farm Workers Union out of, I think they're based in Bakersfield now. And the Farm Workers Union, as many of you may know, was founded by Cesar Chavez, who is an Arizona native from Yuma. And this was established as sort of their outreach to Spanish-speaking communities, and it was, from my understanding, the first community radio network specifically targeting the Spanish-speaking community in the United States. And we have a station here in Phoenix that actually airs them. I think it's 88.3 FM. KCEP up in Vegas, they're known as Power 88. They're similar a little bit to KPOO, except, you know, because they're in Vegas, I guess they like to be a little more flashy or something. I don't know. But they focus more on urban music and talk programming of relevance, I guess, to African Americans in the Vegas area. And this is sort of their website. They do a lot of events and really are the only African or Afrocentric focused music station in Las Vegas from what I could tell, although I might be wrong. But this is the one that tends to, wow, Popeyes, that is gangsta. I didn't see that before I came, so that's interesting. I'm going to get off of that because I'm a vegan now and it's going to make me want to backslide. All right, and then the last of the ethnic stations I'm going to share with you is one called KUYI up in Winslow, which kind of covers Flagstaff if you can get it on your car radio. And this is a Native American focused station that is run by the Hopi community up in northern Arizona. And they air a lot of Native focused programming, some of which we actually carry on Radio Phoenix as well. And so these are some of their staff, you know, some of their air talent and people who help run the station. And that's their station manager. And at some point when I think it's too hot in Phoenix, I might actually go up there and say hi, because then it'll be really nice up there. All right, so that's pretty much most of what I had to say. I want to open it up maybe to some questions if any of you have questions. Or I can go home and cry.
You said you've been involved for 14 years. How did you first get involved?
I actually first got involved at a college station at Rutgers University, and somebody just said, hey, we're looking for people to do a show, and I was like, okay, I got a couple hours a week, and so they taught me how to do it, and over time I realized, hey, I might want to do this as a career, and just started studying media.
What was the show, though?
I actually did a gospel show and sucked at it, and then I did a, not the playing of the music, but talking on the air, because I was just terrified. And so I started helping out with a talk show, and then got better, and then I was like, wow, I really like this, so yeah.
I was curious about that.
Go ahead.
Did you, have you ever heard of a station called Creamy Radio?
Yes.
Okay, I was curious if this fits into one of the categories of your podcast.
Maybe. Actually, it's been about a year since I've checked their website out. I don't remember. Do they actually have people doing shows, or is it just like a music mix that just kind of does its own thing?
They have people doing shows. It's like there's a DJ segment.
Okay.
Their site has a lot of news and events going on, but not talk or anything like that.
Then I would say that could be considered a community station, depending on what their focus is on. But yeah, thank you. I forgot about Creamy Radio. I have to write them down now. We might want to invite them to a barbecue.
They're good guys. They have a lot to do with the McDowell Mountain Music Festival.
Yeah, that's right. One more thing to do. Cool. Somebody else had a question back here?
Do you follow the same regulations, guidelines as commercial, or is there special, besides the advertising, of course, is there other special regulations that community radio stations have to follow? Or?
Those that are on the air with a broadcast license, yes. We don't. Well, we do, because we have applied for an FM license, and so our goal is to, in addition to doing the online station, to simulcast that on FM here in town. So the answer is yes. Most stations do, but it's mostly just whatever the federal regulation is, not necessarily specific to commercial radio.
Is your distinction between community and local just non-commercial?
When I say community, I mean that it's a station that focuses on involvement of the local community in its operations, as well as in the content that it produces, and it tends to focus heavily on locally produced or locally focused programming. So, for instance, KJZZ would not be considered a community station. It's a local station, but it's not community, because about 80 to 90% of their content is from NPR, and we know NPR is not based here. And most of their content, with a few exceptions, every now and then they'll do a national story that is focused on Phoenix or something because we did something dumb. So they're doing, a national story, but most of the time, I would say an NPR station is not a community station, it's a local station. Actually, there is one, I'll show you, there is one exception to that. I think it's KUNM. Let's see what that gives us. Probably nothing. Okay, so I will just look silly. But KUNM in Albuquerque would be the exception. They are actually a NPR station that's run by the University of New Mexico, but they're also a community station because they do engage the community and they do produce local content. So
is syndication, whether it's kind of time filling or exporting your product throughout the country, is that a goal, or is that counter to what you guys are trying to accomplish?
No, and we're not averse to syndication. We actually air a lot of really good syndicated programs that would otherwise not get airplay here. But I think that our primary goal is to serve the local community and to provide an outlet for voices that aren't being heard. So, for instance, you might have some really great ideas about a show, and you should do one. But to better answer your question directly, there are a couple of shows we're looking at developing that would be more community-produced shows, like, not just one or two people, but the community as a whole. One called the Bungalow Show, which we want to develop, that would provide an outlet for independent arts and culture here. Like, for instance, instead of Jordan Sparks having to go all the way to LA to be on American Idol, she could have started on the Bungalow Show. You know what I'm saying? And that's the show that we're looking at that has potential of being syndicated. Good questions. You guys are smarter than I'm used to.
Any other questions?
Are there any? How is the syndication handled financially, or is it more of a open forum to get more content out to the station?
Well, we would basically, if hypothetically, if we were to syndicate a show, we have different options. We could go through a group called Pacifica Radio, which is the owner of KPFA. They have the ability to put content on satellite, and they also have an internet portal that all of their affiliates, of which we are one of, can tap into and get programming. We could also try to work out something with NPR or another group, depending on what it is we're trying to syndicate. But typically in a syndication model, your station would produce the show, and then you would make it available to other stations, and then depending on whether you have a sponsor for it or whether you don't, you might charge the affiliation fee. I'm just getting tongue-tied now. And then that's kind of how you would make money, would be either affiliation fees and or sponsorship. Cool.
What are some of your favorite places in Phoenix to discover new music or online?
The Rhythm Room. And it's not just because they were gracious enough to let us do a fundraiser there. Big Fish Pub, Yucca Tap. There's a place, actually, is it over here in Chandler? I haven't been to it yet, but it's like a jazz spot or something.
Travis and Williamsfield, I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but I heard that's a good place to go as well.
Jazz Bistro.
Jazz Bistro, yeah, Warren's Jazz Bistro, thank you.
Other questions?
Cool.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.